So, have you ever had a dream you just postponed? Or maybe a calling you never even pursued? Let's be totally honest with ourselves for a second here. We all have that lingering thought in the back of our minds, right? That little what if that we usually end up silencing because, well, the fear of failure is just way too loud. But what happens when you finally push past all that fear, put absolutely everything on the line, and the world still looks at you and says, no? Picture this. You spend months, maybe years, pouring your absolute heart into crafting a story you just know could change lives. You finally manage to find a publisher, and boom, your lifelong dream becomes a reality. But then, almost nobody buys it. A few months roll by, and your publisher just throws in the towel. They give up on you. Your book is physically boxed up and removed from the shelves. As far as the rest of the world is concerned, the dream is completely over. It's done. And for most people, the story would end right there in the dust. But this one didn't.
So let's dive into this. Welcome to today's Explainer, where we're going to unpack the incredible real-life underdog story behind Paulo Coelho's legendary novel, The Alchemist. I'm telling you, the story behind its monumental success is actually just as fascinating and deeply inspiring as the story inside its pages. We are going to look at exactly how a forgotten, rejected manuscript became literally one of the most widely read books in human history, and what it teaches us about our own potential.
Part 1. The Forgotten Dream. Searching for Purpose.
Okay, to truly understand this book, we first have to understand the author. Long before Paulo Coelho was a household name, the guy was just lost. He was desperately searching for direction. Family expectations, constant uncertainty, painful rejection, and honestly, crippling self-doubt followed him around for years. He felt completely torn between what society expected of him and what he actually wanted to do with his life. And the thing is, he wasn't necessarily out there chasing fame or massive financial success. He was really just searching for purpose. What he didn't realize at the time was that those agonizing, deeply human struggles were actually laying the bedrock for his future masterpiece.
Moving on to Part 2. Writing The Alchemist, A Story of Destiny.
When Coelho finally sat down to write The Alchemist in 1988, he wasn't trying to build some massive international literary brand. He simply wanted to tell a story about dreams, about fear, and about the really strange ways life guides us toward who we're meant to become. He introduced this core philosophy of the personal legend, basically the idea that every single person has a unique purpose they are destined to accomplish. Now, the plot itself actually builds on a very ancient international folktale archetype. If you're a literature nerd, it's classified in the Aaron Thompson Euther Index as Type 1645, The Treasure at Home. It's this timeless narrative structure we've seen in a poem by the 13th century Persian poet Rumi, and even in the 1001 Nights. It's all about wandering far and wide, only to discover that what you were looking for was right where you started the whole time.
To convey this idea, Coelho wrote about an Andalusian shepherd boy named Santiago. Santiago keeps having this recurring dream about a hidden treasure at the Egyptian pyramids. He meets a king who tells him to sell his sheep and go after his personal legend. So Santiago goes for it, but man, it is not easy. He gets robbed in Tangiers, has to work for a crystal merchant just to survive, meets an Englishman looking for an alchemist, falls in love with a girl named Fatima, and finally meets the wise alchemist himself. Together, they face warring desert tribes, and at one point, Santiago even has to turn himself into a literal dust storm to survive. You know, just your average Tuesday in the desert. But when he finally reaches the pyramids and digs for his treasure, he's robbed again. However, the thieves mock him, and their mockery inadvertently reveals that his true treasure was actually buried back home under the ruined church where his entire journey started. Santiago's quest is basically a mirror for our own messy, real-life search for our calling.
The absolute heart of the book is perfectly summarized in this famous quote. When you really want something to happen, the whole universe will conspire so that your wish comes true. It's so profound, isn't it? Coelho believed in this concept so deeply that he actually wrote the entire novel in just 2 weeks. 2 weeks! He later explained that he could work at that blistering pace because the story was, in his own words, already written in his soul.
Which brings us to Part 3, the initial failure, silence, and rejection.
So, when The Alchemist was first published in Brazil, the expectation was that he was finally achieving his lifelong dream. He was going to be an impactful author. The reality? Absolute crickets. Sales were just abysmal. Any tiny bit of initial excitement faded incredibly fast, and his publisher literally just pulled the plug. Think about how gut-wrenching that is. Imagine pouring your absolute soul into a project, knowing deep down it's your life's work, only to watch it just vanish. It would have been so incredibly easy for Coelho to just accept defeat and let failure convince him that all his efforts were totally meaningless.
But here's the thing, he flat out refused to let one rejection define the future of his work. Just like his character Santiago, who kept pushing for it after getting robbed of his money in Tangiers, and then robbed again at the pyramids, Coelho made a pivotal decision to keep going. He literally embodied the resilience of his own protagonist.
All right, part 4, the global comeback, word of mouth.
Let's just walk through this timeline really quick because it is wild. Written in a flash of inspiration in 1988. Dropped and essentially left for dead by his original publisher in 1989. But he perseveres. A different publisher eventually decides to take a chance on it. And slowly, very organically, readers start handing the book to their friends. Word of mouth starts to build. By 1993, the English publication launches the book into the global stratosphere. And fast forward to 2009, this once-forgotten boxed-up manuscript actually sets a Guinness World Record.
And the result of that crazy journey? 150 million. That is the number of copies The Alchemist has sold worldwide. Just let that staggeringly massive number sink in for a second. 150 million copies of a book that a publisher once pulled from the shelves because nobody wanted to buy it.
The sheer, unprecedented scale of this comeback is just mind-blowing. I mean, an average best-selling novel might be translated into, a handful of languages? The Alchemist has been translated into more than 65 languages. That specific achievement is exactly what earned Paulo Coelho the Guinness World Record for the world's most translated living author. He went from absolute silence in Brazil to the entire globe speaking his words.
Finally, part 5, a universal connection, why the story endures.
So why did millions of people across completely different cultures, languages, and generations connect so deeply with this one story? Because it perfectly contrasts the absolute tragedy of never trying with the profound reward of courage. It hits on fundamental human fears that we all share, the fear of failure, the fear of living with regret, and that paralyzing fear of what if. It proves to us, both through Santiago's fictional journey and Paulo Coelho's very real one, that setbacks are not final. One difficult chapter, whether it's getting robbed in the desert or getting dropped by a publisher, absolutely does not determine the end of your entire story.
So, as we wrap up today's explainer, I really want to leave you with a question to chew on. What would you pursue right now if you weren't afraid of failing? What is your personal legend? The Alchemist teaches us that the treasure is often right in front of us, but we still have to be brave enough to take the journey to realize it's actually there. Thank you so much for exploring this with me today, and until next time, keep seeking your own treasure.